Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is a progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, progressive, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. We are an independent media outlet that, unlike mainstream media beholden to corporations, we only owe allegiance to you. Remember, you can also send me a tweet at EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right. Welcome to Politics Done Right. From the studios of KPFT 90.1 FM Houston, your community radio station, we have a great program for you today. Karl Smith discusses what Democrats must do to win 2022 with aggressive messaging. Karl Smith is concerned that Democrats are ceding the 2022 election. Hey, a listener said, I have given up on humanity, completely on humanity. I can't take it anymore. I said to him, no, listen to this. Look, I got a necessary rant on student loans. I want you guys to listen to this because it's going to be a very important message. So these three topics and much more is what we're going to talk about, but we need you to be here. Anyway, I got some big thank yous that I've got to give. Mike Hall of Conroe, Texas. Claudio Arena of Sugar Land, Texas. Teresa Allen of Spring, Texas. Dave Bartlow from, I guess that is New Orleans? Anyway, on Facebook. Nellie Clausen, Conroe, Texas. David Morris, Houston, Texas. Thank you guys so kindly for those contributions. We could not do KPFT without you. You guys keep us on air. This 100,000 watt station that we have here, it takes a hell of a lot of electricity. It takes a hell of a lot of cooling. So you guys make it happen. Thank you so kindly. Now, today is the last day of the year. For those who are listening to this program on New Year's Eve, I want to ask you to think about this very important year that we have coming now. More than ever, independent media needs you. So please follow those donors that contributed to Politics Done Right to ensure that we can go ahead and keep this going. Please go to kpft.org and give whatever you can in the name of Politics Done Right. We're going to have a few offers with books and so forth you'd hear later on in the show. This is not a show that's going to be talking about gimme, 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 but this is a show that's going to say, this is the kinds of things that we have to offer. These are the things that you're going to hear at KPFT that you won't hear anywhere else. So, be a part of it. You can get any one of my books as a gift for becoming a member of KPFT. Go to kpft.org, click that donate button, select Politics Done Right as the show you're supporting, and go into the gift area and select As I See It, Class Warfare, the only resort to right-wing doom, or you can also get It's Worth It, How to Talk to Your Right-Wing Relatives, Friends, and Neighbors, or go to How to Make America Utopia, Take Away the Economy from Those Who Rigged It. If you get one book, it gives you one particular membership price. 2 books, you get a discount, and 3 books, you get an even better discount. So please consider becoming a member of KPFT, and in the process, you get the gifts of the books. You can get Politics Done Right Mondays through Fridays on Facebook Live at facebook.com/Politics Done Right, on YouTube Live at politicsdoneright.com/YouTube. Please do not forget to follow me on Twitter for updates. My handle is at Egberto Willies, at EGBERTOWILLIES. Before you get started, please remember to keep your community radio station in your minds, KPFT in your minds. Talk about it. Tell your friends about it. Tell them you know about this station in town, 90.1 FM Houston, that needs your support, that is there to provide that nourishment that we need. 713-526-5738. KPFT.org. Visit us online. Contribute online. KPFT 90.1 FM. You can visit us at kpft.org. You know what I'm going to say now, folks? Let's get busy. Let's go to the student loan.
And we have breaking news from the White House. The president has just announced he's extending the pause on federal student loan repayments. NBC's Monica Alba is back with me from the White House. Monica, we didn't let you get away very far. A lot of news coming today. Talk to me about the student loans and just extending this. It was supposed to expire January 31st.
This is a really significant development, Andrea. When the president first came into office, he directed the payments be put on pause through August. Then later in the summer, they determined they were going to extend that again as Delta was surging to the end of January, as you point out. And now the president is saying an additional 90 days will go into effect for this pause. So this punts it all the way to May 1st, 2022. And of course, this is something that the administration had been under pressure to make a decision about, given what we're seeing with the economy. And this affects more than 41 million Americans who really felt they wanted this breathing room to continue to figure out what the president and this administration may do overall when it comes to student loans. And it is something that the Department of Education is reviewing with borrowers to see if they're going to make some changes. Of course, there have been many advocates, many Democratic lawmakers even, who've asked the president to consider forgiving up to a certain amount of these loans.
As it turns out, we got another 90-day reprieve for all our young people with debt. Well, actually with everybody who has student debts. I have an open discussion with a darn good friend of mine, Professor Jay Tice. He told me that I needed to be careful the way I pushed student loan forgiveness. And he made a great case. And the great case he made had to do with all those folks in Appalachia that never took advantage of student loans. They just went ahead and didn't go to college. And he spoke about all these people in these different parts of the countries who pretty much would not get the benefit of getting that break, that student loan break, and that the Republicans could use that as a hammer to say, look at these elitists on the coast giving themselves all these tax breaks for these kids who went to school. And, you know, after he told me that, I had to think about it. And he's partially right. But you cannot go with partially right when something is absolutely right. We allowed all these state governments to give breaks to corporations. We allowed all these state governments to cut their support for public state schools. And then it meant those who wanted a higher education had to spend more for that education. You can say, well, yeah, they're the ones who are going to benefit from the higher salaries from that education. True. So I want them to share a responsibility of that education. But you know who benefits the most from an educated populace? The plutocracy, the owners of Exxon, the owners of all these other things. They are the ones who benefit from an educated population. They owe it to America to pay for those schools. Because remember, when they offloaded all of that into loans, they get you twice. Corporations lend you the money. After corporations lend you the money, they profit from the interest rates that you pay to pay back that money. And then the corporations make money on your excess labor, meaning you go ahead and you work for Corporation X, you design a parachute or you design an airfoil, you design a wing, and they make X amount of dollars on your design. They pay you a bit and they profit the rest. So everybody is making a profit on you. I'm not saying you shouldn't partake in your education, but it should be shared. And that's what student loan forgiveness is all about. Student loan forgiveness is saying for those people, and by the way, if somebody in Appalachia wants to step out and go to college like many do it. If somebody in the ghetto, the barrios, and everywhere else want to do it. But it is important for us to understand how our economic system works. When I wrote the first part of this story, and I put a video on YouTube, somebody said, Egberto, you freeloader, pay your damn bills yourself. I don't want to pay your bills. To which I replied to him is, I am not in this fight for me. My student loan was paid off 10 years after I got out of college. Every penny of it was paid off by me, okay? So I'm not a freeloader. Most of this stuff that I'm doing is not, oh, I'm doing it for Egberto. It's not the case. But I'm saying it's not fair. First of all, it costs me a lot less to go to school than it costs my daughter, than it costs everybody else that's going to school now, because our system wasn't as ripping people off as it is now. Eric says, politics done right. Egberto Willis is called a job you, a person used to pay your debt back. If you borrowed it, paying off your debt teaches you something about life. No, it doesn't teach you anything. If it taught you anything, why would the corporations take such good care of creating bankruptcy laws? Bankruptcy laws prevent corporations from paying debt. And I, as a small company, had to give up over $5,000 from a company who went bankrupt and didn't pay me. Let's go ahead and play this other video. I want you to listen to this guy in detail. He pretty much tells us why COVID is here to stay. And it has little to do with science. I want you guys to check this out. We'll take it on the other side.
The testing is still such a big issue, and this is something the Biden administration promised from the get-go. They were going to get testing up to speed, and yet it hasn't been up to speed. It's not up to speed, maybe because vaccinations were ongoing, and it seemed like the waves were under control. That being said, it's still not there. So what's going on with these at-home tests? Why can you get them all over the world in bulk, and you can't get them here?
Well, the distinction here, Katie, is the difference between a nationalized healthcare system and one that is based on the pursuit of profit. I mean, we have here a system that was supposed to be built around market demand, right? And so, as you mentioned, when we got focused on vaccinations, then suddenly testing capacity went down. But first, let me just show you the benchmark against which experts say we should be comparing ourselves. I want to show you a couple of numbers here. At the beginning of the pandemic, experts basically said we are going to need 20 million daily tests in order to remobilize the economy. That's about a sixth of the nation on a daily basis. But even at the very peak of testing, when we were flat out a year ago, we only really got to about 2.2 million a day. Right now, we're looking at an average of about 1.5 million a day, just a small fraction of that benchmark number. And so how are we going to fill that gap? Well, some people are hoping that the 11 makers of at-home tests plus the private providers of lab tests might be able to fill the gap, but they are also flat out right now. We spoke to the operations manager of one such company yesterday. Here's what he had to say about the flood they are seeing.
2-3 weeks ago, across the board, we were collecting about 30,000 COVID tests per day. Today, we actually just finished our day with over 120,000 samples collected across the nation. We're seeing sample increases of about 300% in Florida, Texas seeing about 400%, Southern California seeing about 350% increases from last week alone. So definitely seeing a big increase in sample volume.
So what we're seeing here, Katie, is definitely a sort of structural failure, right? If you have people lining up right now, that is market demand, right, without the adequate supply to meet it. The free market, the invisible hand, is not going to take care of this. One public health expert said to me that this should really be compared to the kind of preparations that one makes in a military setting, right? We spend a lot of money on the military here in this country, in part because we keep emergency stuff at the ready. We fill hangars with equipment that we may hopefully never use in our lifetime and have people maintaining that and having it ready at all times. It's that sort of thing that we're looking at. Remember that 20 million person a day benchmark that we're talking about? That would cost, the estimate is, about $20 million a day. The market does not want to pay for that unless people are going to pay them back. Right now, what we're talking here about is really the need to have an ongoing capacity, not just for this crisis we're in right now, but for the next variant, because not all Americans are getting vaccinated. We're going to keep seeing variants. We're going to need that kind of capacity, and it's clear that it's not going to be possible to make money off it in the way that would keep it in supply the way we're used to, Katie.
You know, you rarely see that point of view coming on TV, and I was shocked. I mean, I was just basically blogging, and when he said it's the market, that's when my ears kind of peaked up, and I started to listen to what he had to say. People, you cannot have a for-profit health delivery system if you want to keep people healthy. You cannot have a for-profit health delivery system if you want to mitigate pandemics. It's impossible. And if you want a clear example, in America, we are so used to something goes wrong, we pop a pill. Something goes wrong, we go jump to a doctor, and if you can pay for it, you pop a pill, all that good stuff. You know, I can name you countries right now that they have no vaccine, but the people are not dying in those countries like here, right? And the reason why is most of them, they have some sort of socialized medicine. Everybody follows the rules. etc. I can even start from my country, even though we've had our deaths from SIDA, which is AIDS. I mean, it's not SIDA. What are we talking about? The COVID. It has not reached the rates that we've seen in other places, right? Again, if you take a look at some of the places, if you want a direct correlation with health, take a look at for-profit health and you see what we're talking about. Let's go ahead and bring up my newsletter. I got an email from a supporter that almost broke my heart. I immediately came to my senses. I had the following 2 paragraphs in my Politics Done Right newsletter, not the Substack newsletter, the Politics Done Right newsletter, that I believe elicited the email. This is what I said in that newsletter. The year ahead is enormous. If we live up to our humanity, it will work out well. I had some other stuff that I'm not going to repeat here, but then I said, each of us has the power to incentivize goodness and humaneness with our acts. We need to live up to the expectations of those who need us at each other's throats. Let's use this holiday season to reevaluate ourselves and give others a place to land to do good. That act will let the country live up to its claimed values. You know, we claim to be the bastion on the hill. We claim to be fair. We claim to be a democracy. We claim all these things. Of course, none of it is really absolutely true. We know that when the Constitution was written, it wasn't written for most of us, wasn't written for women at all. And it wasn't written, of course, for people of color of any type, whether indigenous or otherwise. And we've progressively moved forward. So, I mean, that's why I said, let's start living up to the values we claim to have. But anyway, the person who wrote me said, I have all but given up on humanity in sort of a dark way. Given what we are living through, this is still the article I'm reading now. Given what we're living through, it is not hard to understand why many people feel that way. But he has not just checking out. He was just not checking out. That email was likely a message to someone he felt comfortable with, giving him reason to stay checked in and engaged. I see that as my purpose and the purpose of many of us who have a platform to help navigate a system that can fluctuate between too sterile for humanity, inhumanely cruel, and sometimes surprisingly supportive. My response, of course, was not to give up. Fareed Zakaria had 2 historians on his show this Sunday that gave me hope while may scare many. In the 1860s, we had the Civil War. It was brother against brother. We had people were up in arms about, now they want to say it was a war based on states' rights. That's BS. It was a war for those who wanted slavery and those who didn't. That's what the Civil War is about. Don't let anybody change that reality. So that the chasm in the country at that time was huge, huge. I mean, families were split, just like we have families split right now between Trumpists and otherwise. Families were split. So we've been there. Then we jumped to the 1960s, right? In this one decade, JFK murdered, assassinated. MLK murdered, assassinated. Malcolm X murdered, assassinated. Bobby Kennedy murdered, assassinated. If you were living then, you would want to know in that decade, how can America, this supposed bastion of democracy, this bastion of sanity, how could all of that happen? When I think about it, I was born in the 60s, okay? And when I think about the amount of stuff that happened in the 60s, I'm trying to think about how people would think about it if we had a president assassinated, one of the major civil rights leaders assassinated, a secretary of state, not secretary of state, a former attorney general assassinated, a presidential candidate, and another civil rights leader that was taken whole. How would we, if that happened today, compared to what's happening now, we'd be like, wow. It's the end of the world. But that happened in the 60s. Not to speak about Kent State, where the National Guards killed students Not to speak about the Democratic Convention, where they cracked skulls like crazy. All of this in the 60s. Remember, we look at it today and it's like, oh, this is crazy. They had an attack on the Capitol. Hey, the one thing that never happened before was the attack on the Capitol. But we could say we had an attack on the Capitol. In those days, we had the assassination of the likely next president of the United States. And we also had the assassination of a president of the United States. So let's put things into perspective here. So let me continue reading that part, okay? In the 1960s, JFK, MLK, Malcolm X, Bobby Kennedy were assassinated. Riots and polarization were high. Understand, none of this was ever started by the masses in the aggregate. None of it. And many plutocrats have always profited from the turmoil. You have all those assassinations, you got all those, you have the place blowing up. The plutocrats are ready there to rebuild, sell the cement, sell the rocks, sell everything, sell the guns. They are there. They're there. The plutocrats profit going up. When the cops are blowing crap up, they're there to refurnish. When we're blowing countries up, they're there to sell the bombs. The plutocrats always make a profit. But they can only do that, right? We can only go into Iraq, Afghanistan, and all these other places we go into if the people who themselves don't want war go out and say, that's not what we want. But if we're at each other's throats, we can't see anything. We look at everything through the lens of our ideological following, which actually is a silly lens because ideologically, except for things like church and abortion, most Americans want the same thing. So when you go ahead and allow that polarization, you are playing directly into the plutocrats so that they can take advantage not of those damn liberals, but also those conservatives. And that is why I preach what I preach. If I go ahead and kick West and CSAC and all these right wingers out of this stuff and say, you don't think like us, they win. They win because we stay at each other's throat, and then they can continue doing everything because they'll have West defending their right flank and they'll have Rudnin defending their not Rudnin. Rudnin is a lefty. They'll have the centrists defending their left flank. That's how it works, people. So what I put as my last paragraph of that little sub post is the following. We still have avenues to communicate with each other. Here's one. Here is one. Politics done right. So remember, share it. Let people hear the story. Let people understand what's going on. We still have avenues to communicate with each other. It is incumbent on us not to give up our brothers and sisters' humanity. Those who profit from the chaos need to factionalize us. It is incumbent on those who see the big picture to continue the engagement. Otherwise, those dependent on our confused state will profit. I mean, I hope I sent that out to probably 6,000 people today. I hope people take heed on that because that is the game. We have a great guest as usual. He's been with us before, but he wrote a very important piece that we want to explore. And I think we all need to sit back, grab a cup of coffee, and get ready to listen to some important information. Karl Smith is an engineer. You know, I really like to interview engineers and their political perspective. He has a message for the Democratic Party. He stated in his article titled 2022 State of Emergency, Democrats must sell the brand or we will lose. Welcome to Politics Done Right. Once again, Karl, how are you doing today?
Very good. Actually, we all lose, not just we. You know, it's not just the Democrats will lose, but the Republicans will lose too.
That is so important because you sent me along with your article a message that of how people, how conservatives, or I should say right-wing ideologues like Joe Wilson are campaigning. I want to start there because I think it's important to see what they're trying to do to the psyche of the American people. So let's start there.
Okay. Do you have that article? You want to pull that up, that little clip up?
Yeah. Tell us what he's actually doing.
Okay. So basically what he's doing is and what Democrats or Republicans do, constantly is and it's really against the brand. And no matter who it is, whatever Democrat, we all basically come under this fire. You could be the most, conservative Democrat out there, and they'll still call you a socialist or communist or whatever. Even after the or during the elections, the runoffs for the Senate in Georgia, driving around, I saw these huge billboards, with Trump and socialism, and just trying to basically, equate that Democrats are going to take your freedoms away and wreck the economy. The store shelves will be bare. We're going to leave all sorts of debt to your kids. And Joe Wilson, so he came out with his newsletter here just a day or so ago, and he calls it the Biden Socialist Spending Package. So this massive Biden-supported Democrat-passed multi-trillion-dollar Build Back Bankrupt spending package, will saddle younger Americans with unimaginable debt and destroy jobs, while Biden's policies are devaluating retirement accounts devaluing. Undermining Social Security and compromising Medicare. Anyway, goes on. It's like given today's devastating inflation affecting the pocketbooks of families. See, they point out a number of things that are really about kind of temporary fluctuations because of supply chain problems and everything. And if we had raised the minimum wage to a livable wage and then pushed up those lower end wages, our citizens would have more buffer to these fluctuations. There's also fluctuations due to COVID itself and the supply or demand for product. And we had very low inflation last year. This year we have a bit higher inflation, but that noise will go away. But they want to scare people with that these are permanent problems caused by the kinds of things that we're doing right now. The kinds of things that Democrats want to do.
Now, in your article, you've made a very important observation. You say that too often Democrats have a tendency to work on charisma, try to bring out their base at the time of an election, etc. And I think your theory is that, no, you have to be, you don't, first of all, you don't start on the defensive, you don't start with platitudes, but you hit it in the gut. And before we go into specifically, people talk about capital, they make Democrats look like they're anti-economic activity and they are just for giving things away. So before we get there, I think what you're alluding to is Democrats need to get on the offensive. Am I correct?
Right. And they need to go after all voters and not just the base and not just get out, the new voters, which tend to vote more Democrat than Republican and so on. We've got to go after their base and those, in the moderates and independents and so on, people that have been voting for Republicans, but given a better message and a message that they can relate to and a message that counters these fundamental arguments that we're socialists, we're just going to, because no matter how much you want to do, if you want to help somebody and want to, make things better and all that, but if you just don't think you can afford it, then you're not going to do it. You can't do it. If you think that, so if their message wins, then, by not understanding, and it wins when people don't understand a few basic principles, about.
No, I don't want to go into those principles yet because you elaborate on those principles perfectly. And folks, I want everybody here to visit votereducationproject.com, votereducationproject.com. That is the website created by Karl, and Karl gives a great explanation of how an economy, how it should work, etc. And he still calls it capitalism, He and I will never agree on that terminology, but what he supports and what he wants is exactly the same thing that I want for our society. And that's what we find very often, that we have different nomenclatures, et cetera, but we all want the same thing, Republicans, Democrats alike. So before we get there, though, Karl, first of all, I want to let you know that I love your article. I think your article has a whole lot of insight that people need to read. So folks, again, go to votereducationproject.com. Very important for both my KPFT listeners as well as our online listeners to go visit that site, and also provide whatever support you can at that particular website. Anyway, Karl, isn't it true that most of these Republicans who are running and giving all these false information, when Build Back Better comes out, or even when all the other bills that were passed come out, haven't they been campaigning saying we're providing this for our constituents, and these being Democratic initiatives?
Sure. And I would actually add to what you said before about going to the website. Go to the video section, and there's a video on how bottom-up economics works. So that's the one that's about 11 minutes, a little less than 11 minutes. That'll give you the fundamentals, on how to talk to these other people. But yeah, the Republicans, when things are going well, they'll take credit for what they haven't earned. They will misrepresent what they do, and they misrepresent what we do. They take credit for what they haven't done, and then disavow anything that, the screw ups, or they equate, well, the Democrats are just as bad and so on, as the Republicans, so they'll basically, misrepresent, things. And for a lot of voters, it's just, they don't get down into the weeds of, how things work, the economy works and all that. So a lot of it just sounds like he said, she said. So unless we get into the fundamentals, then, and they're pretty easy to explain, in an 11-minute video, you can do a pretty good job about explaining, how this stuff works. And also we've got to, the reason I say, that we've got to really go after this whole thing about capitalism, and socialism, is that they invest a lot of money. That's what they think works. And it does with about half the voters. So, unless we're willing to go there, if we kind of shy away from that, of defending this position and actually taking on the lead in this, then they're going to continue to win those people. There's a lot of voters that understand the Democrat argument, which is more of a moral argument, but there's voters that they're more on the economic argument, and a lot of what the Republicans say sounds like it makes sense. So we have to show that, okay, it might sound good, but doesn't work. And how? And we've said that before, but we haven't actually explained how. So the reason I go in and go ahead and take on, capitalism, fine. Well, we need to change it from this, what they want to do is have socialism against capitalism. What we need to do is change it to it's rigged capitalism versus enabled capitalism that works for all of us.
And, that is why I am, I still, when we talk, I don't sit down here arguing whether to use the word capitalism or not with you at all, because basically you came out with a project and you made a hell of a video. And that video I think that video needs to get a whole lot more traction than it has right now, because what you show in that video is exactly how a free enterprise system is supposed to work. Now you continue to use the word capitalism, and so forth. Well, I'll give you that, sir. But your theory as far as what an economic system should look like that supports us all is exactly what I think we need to do. I think I would have a bit more social programs in there, but that's debatable as far as whether that it will defeat the purpose or not. I don't know. We won't know till we try. So why don't we take some time here, Karl, and explain what the economic system as you see it. I think we talk why don't you explain it?
Well, yeah. So they want to make it about socialism versus capitalism, and that socialism is they're going to take your freedoms, or we're going to take your freedoms away and leave the store shelves bare and everything. But the reality here is there's investments that we all need. Businesses don't exist without, healthy and educated people, and they don't buy those individually. They don't pay for those up front. They don't exist without infrastructure. They don't exist, without safe communities, community development, safety nets, and the research. Think about how many of our big corporations, or even the smallest businesses today, how many of them wouldn't exist without the investments we made in creating microelectronics and creating the internet and so on. These have paid back millions of times, or I don't know what the number is, what the multiplier is, but it's a huge number. The dollars that we put into creating microelectronics, our basic public, one of our basic public investments has a huge multiplier and payback to the taxpayer. So we, and then also in educating, in 1800, I don't think most Americans realize that in 1800s, a good part of it, 90% of our population was in poverty, 90%, but then we started actually, we created the K-12 education system, free education. We basically, we had started building our healthcare system. We built infrastructure. We built our safety nets, the safe communities, community development. We made all these basic investments, and these things are critical conditions for businesses, or most businesses, to exist. Yes, if you don't have those kinds of or those common investments, then some businesses can exist, but most people are in poverty, and that economy doesn't really work very well.
Right. I want to stop you right there for 1 second, just one quick second. And Karl, please keep your thought. But when you gave an out to some businesses that I think is undeserved, when you said maybe there are a few businesses that don't merit from this governmental intervention, et cetera, my contention is that the mere fact that everybody else get helped, and that everybody else that get help is then going to buy your product because now they are capable of buying your product, you are helped, even if indirectly. Just wanted to make
well, there's a difference between existing and doing well. Yes, those businesses, a little store might be a little thing, but it could be it could be helping many more people have much more product. When the population doesn't have money. Right. You don't have, people buying the things that they need. Yes, they have a lot of needs, but they don't have the money to buy, to buy their needs. If you look at third world countries today, where they don't make these huge investments, about 75%, 30 or 66 or 2/3 to 3/4 of their population is in poverty. Right. Okay. So, if we want to, continue, and Republicans, it's, talk about taking freedoms. Okay. What kind of freedom do you have if you don't have your health, if you don't have education, if you don't have infrastructure around you to be able to do things, if you don't have the research that basically made, discovered a cure for, whatever you ended up getting and all of that, or what you will get. If we don't, if you don't have a safe community, if you don't have community development, all of these things, if you don't have those things, what kind of freedoms do you have? So when we spend money on those things, yes, it does help people. And some people call that socialism. Okay. But socialism really, in the ultimate thing, would be government control and ownership of pretty much everything. So, all sorts of production. So this is really just enough of those common investments, whether you call it socialism, or if it's socialism, it's really for businesses as much as for people, because businesses do not exist. So is it a necessary part of capitalism? And that's what I'm arguing. So it's an enabled capitalism to be much more prosperous, that then can benefit everybody. Versus calling it socialism, because that sounds like government ownership, especially the way they define it. And in a lot of people's minds, that's government taking control of everything. These things called democratic socialisms, that's really a misnomer. If you look at those economies in Europe that are called that, most products and services are provided by capitalism, by free enterprise. Okay, but there's some things that are healthcare and education, other things, college education, all that, is provided by our common investments. And so when we help people, when we invest in these things, and when we make sure that we have the safety nets and everything to, to bring people up economically. Are we only helping them?
No.
The answer is no. We're also helping the businesses. Business communities are arguing for, they were arguing here in this pandemic, that we need the stimulus, or we need those payments to individuals, to help keep them on their feet.
It is amazing that you brought
businesses.
It's amazing that you brought that up, because, when you have somebody like Elon Musk saying, "Oh, I'm not for Build Back Better," when he benefited, it's amazing. The businesses want all the stimuli there up front, but when it is time to make some permanence to give people support, then they bought, because they know, yes, it really means higher taxes, but higher taxes doing good, and that ultimately will do better for the company. You call those investments, by the way, Karl, BPIs, basic public investments. And I think you just did a great example of how basic public investments are actually good for businesses. That's what you just explained right there. Now you have another.
Not just good. I mean, necessary. I mean,
Thanks for the correction. That is a very important correction, because good for and necessary, they're quite. Necessary is much, much more important than just good. You have another thing.
Do you even have a functioning capitalistic system, at any kind of real level, or what we would expect today, without these investments? The answer is no.
You're
so
right.
This is not socialism. So if we basically get people to understand just a few basic concepts which are explained in the video, then it's going to be like the Republicans. They'll say these things, but then that sound good. Oh, we're going to give more money to job creators, and we're going to get government out of the way, and all this kind of things. Those things sound good, but don't work. And then, but if people understand the fundamentals, they'll know that they'll say bull.
Right.
If it's or BS or whatever.
Right.
It's like if somebody tells you can put, a few things about your car. Okay, you're not an expert about auto mechanics. Probably maybe you are, but most people aren't. And yet
I'm not.
They can operate their car. A farmer can basically have a good knows what needs to be done to have a good crop. But if with your car, if somebody tells you put sand in the gas tank and it'll run fine, you're going to say BS, because a few fundamentals. That car is not going to work, with sand in the gas tank. So if we educate people on a few fundamentals, which can be actually laid out in about 11 minutes. So people learn more about their TV remote control and all that kind of stuff. They spend more time learning these things than what it takes just to understand a few basic principles about the economy. And then they'll know the difference between BS and good ideas.
And you have another good point that you talk about called VAW, valuing all workers. And then you put on your title, that creates customers with money. I've always said that not because somebody is rich or not because somebody owns a business means that they either understand economics or that they have a hell of a lot upstairs. They just know what they want to do, or they just know what they're doing. And not the indirect things from not valuing your workers is actually an entire circle, right? That workers aren't valued. They don't make enough. They don't spend. They don't spend. That business that depends on people who spend fails. I mean, they don't get it. So speak a little bit about value all workers.
Right. Yeah. Well, and Henry Ford knew that if he paid his workers, better. Now, he didn't have competition at that point, but he wanted to show the world that, hey, even his own workers could afford, this. So he could have paid them crap and had workers, but he chose to pay them well. And they could actually afford afford the cars. And it turns out most, the wage contribution to the price of products and services is actually pretty small,
right,
for most businesses. And where not, then those prices should be higher. But basically, so if you doubled the minimum wage, and by the way, from 1968 to today, the minimum wage would be about $12 if we had just adjusted inflation. So, $15, and then the economy, our prosperity has actually tripled in that time. So, where obviously none of it has gone to, the hardworking.
No, you said, I think people need to understand that, because, we talk a lot about transferring money to the wealthy and that all the money is going to the top 1%. And the way the Republicans deal with that is they try to talk about wealth envy or that sort of a stuff, which sort of, make a poor person says, no, I don't want wealth envy. I want to do it myself as well, which in general, the wealthy has done it themselves. But the reason I think that is important is for people to understand that the wealthy isn't that the wealthy are not these benevolent folks. The fact of the matter that you just made a very important point on productivity. Productivity went through the roof, meaning it took less people to make a hell of a lot more and to obtain or garner more capital. And all that capital that came in wasn't shared by those who created a better productivity, a better product. All the folks to the top took it all. And I think unless people understand the level of selfishness, the level of thievery that is occurring at the top, they continue to think, well, someday that could be me. No, it's actually never going to be you.
Right. For 99.9999% of the people, right, won't work out. But a lot of that, the greed and everything that's pointed out about corporations is actually just part of the system. It's the people are playing by the rules, and unfortunately, the rules are basically so that you have to maximize return for the investor, even if you're you're what's called externalizing negative. So like if you're kind of screwing up the environment, or you're killing a few customers, or killing some employees, or whatever. Well, if the cost of that, the lawsuits and all that kind of stuff is smaller than the profits you will make, you're supposed to take the profits, to return those to the investor. So you externalize negative. There's a different form, and there's a different form of governance that gets into having to meet the needs of being responsible to the needs of all stakeholders and not just shareholders, and that's basically the benefit corporation and benefits or B Corp certification and so on. So I think about 2/3 of the states now, or somewhere in there, have B Corp. Right. You're able to incorporate as a B Corp, as a benefit corporation. And, if you want to look up B Labs, or, any viewers out there, you look at B Labs and kind of look at what they're doing. But we could actually require, corporations in certain industries, maybe the food industry, medical, energy, to be B Corps. And it's like it's the rules. So then they would be measured against how they treat their community, how they treat their employees, how they treat their their customers and their stockholders and so on. So they have a whole metric system, and it turns out that these corporations generally do better than regular C Corps. Because their reputations are so much better. They create a lot more goodwill in their communities. They don't come in and and take a bunch of tax breaks to come there and just leave at the first, whenever they can move that plant to someplace else. And they're really responsible, to them. And so people respond to them.
I want to take you up on something that you just said, because you keep making these important points, and then I want people to centralize on these points. About 2 minutes ago, you mentioned that these people that are abiding by these rules aren't necessarily bad. They're just playing the game by the rules. And I want to awake everybody to the economist, what I call the latest daddy of capitalism, known as Milton Friedman. And Milton Friedman says specifically that it's not the responsibility of executives in a company to worry about social issues. It's not the responsibility of executives in a company to worry about doing good for society. That's not their job. Their only job is to maximize profits for the shareholder. Henceforth, capitalism, as defined by Milton Friedman, the latest daddy of capitalism, says that the only thing that matters is the maximization of capital. What Karl is speaking about now is saying that doesn't work overall in the long run. And today's economy, that looks like it's doing very well. If you look at the aggregate of all the numbers, it looks great. But the reality is the suffering among so many proves that it doesn't work. Continue, Karl. I just wanted to expand on that because that was a very important point that you made there.
Yeah, the corporations used to have a sense of stewardship, toward their communities and their employees and that kind of thing. But because of this push toward maximizing profit for shareholders, that has gone away in the regulations. And then, a lot of unfortunately, the rich and powerful, end up rewriting or influencing policy. So then it just becomes more and more rigged. And that's where Reich has a lot of videos and articles on Robert Reich on how the system is rigged, by the rich, for the rich. And so it's not a fair system. This was like in the 1800s when we had the robber barons,
right.
So some of them, there were people and companies that did extremely well, but at the expense of almost everybody else not
Absolutely.
doing well. And really, even that wealthy class is actually very small. In a prosperous economy, there'll actually be a broader wealthy class. There might not be some of the wealth, some of the top earners or whatever, they might not have quite as much, but they do extremely well, so we're not going to hurt them,
right.
And it's really a lot of these investments, it's not like, these things have to be put in context. Here, Joe Wilson, he talks about, $4.5 trillion or whatever, these aren't zero costs and
right.
They have to be paid for. Well, when we actually do these investments, they expand the economy. They create $1 billion, they create a bigger economy. And that's that $4.5 trillion that they're talking about. That sounds like a lot of money. Oh man, that's just
over
so
10
much
years.
we can't afford that. But you look at 10 years, yeah, that's going to be, we talk about, well, that's over 10 years or whatever. But we don't actually talk about, and what the Democrats need to mention is this is actually the amount of money, the amount of economic activity over that time, okay, which is somewhere around, $250 trillion.
Right. It's a small percentage.
So $4.5 trillion doesn't really sound a lot in the context.
Karl, we're coming up on time here. So I have to, normally the last question I ask is tell me something you wanted me to ask you that I didn't. But since I know you so well, I'm going to ask for you to do a better thing. And that is tell me what Democrats need to do in 2022 in 2 minutes, exactly what they need to do to win it. My contention is that the media would have you believe that it's all lost. I think it is all there to win. Tell us, right. Karl, how to win.
We have to go after their base. Trump showed that you can go into the enemy camp or people that aren't voting for you, and you can pull out votes. And if for every vote you flip, it's like 2 votes, one less for them, and one more for us. And a lot of people, these places are not monoliths. Husbands don't agree with wives, and kids don't agree with their parents, and all this stuff. So if we go in and message, to all of these places, and not throw a single voter, just not ignore any voters, just go after all of them with a message that can actually resonate with them. Not the moral. We can still make the moral arguments, but we need to make the economic arguments that these are investments that pay off. They create and save more tax revenues than they cost. So, we will pay for these. A fair tax system will help, bootstrap these, help kickstart them. But we need to stop talking about, well, how are we going to pay for such and such, and turn it into an argument of how we're going to kickstart these investments. So like for global warming, we don't have to come up with $35 trillion over the next 30 years or whatever to pay for it, or we have to go 35 trillion. That sounds like almost right now. We have to basically kickstart it with a little bit. That's going to start generating more money, more tax revenues and stuff. It will pay for it. So that in that 35 trillion sounds like a huge amount of money. It's in the context of close to $1 quadrillion of economic activity. We need to point out context. So point out context. Point out. How these things explain how these things actually pay for themselves. And like I said, like little 11-minute video, or not even 11-minute video, explains the basics. There's a lot of basic messages in there. We need to start talking about, basic public investments, and let's go there. Let's make that full argument. And there's plenty of places for little terms and all of that, your sound bites and all that. But there's also a deeper argument.
Look, folks, please visit votereducationproject.com. Votereducationproject.com. Go to the video sections, play the video, listen to the video, watch the video, and share the video most of all. And
how bottom-up economics works. That's specifically that one. How bottom-up economics works.
How bottom-up economics work. It is very, very important for us to start doing the job now, and don't depend on the leadership telling you what to do. Listen to the grassroots people. Listen to the Karl Smiths of the world, and to a message to the Democratic Party. I suggest you grab hold of Karl Smith as soon as you can, because he knows how to speak to not only people in the South, the North, the East, and the West, but he has a canny ability to reach and touch everybody. Karl Smith, thank you so kindly for having been on Politics Done Right.
I hope you had a Merry Christmas and you're looking forward to a Happy New Year. And hopefully we will have a huge disappointment for the Republicans. They're gerrymandering all these districts, and hopefully we can go in and take out voters, and the voters they were counting on, we can take some of them away.
Karl Smith, votereducationproject.com. Thank you so kindly. You can get any one of my books as a gift for becoming a member of KPFT. Go to kpft.org, click that donate button, select Politics Done Right as the show you're supporting, and go into the gift area and select As I See It, Class Warfare, the only resort to right-wing doom. Or you can also get It's Worth It, how to talk to your right-wing relatives, friends, and neighbors. Or go to How to Make America Utopia, take away the economy from those who rigged it. If you get one book, it gives you one particular membership price. 2 books, you get a discount, and 3 books, you get an even better discount. So please consider becoming a member of KPFT, and in the process, you get the gifts of the books. You can get Politics Done Right Mondays through Fridays on Facebook Live at facebook.com/politicsdoneright, on YouTube Live at politicsdoneright.com/YouTube. Please do not forget to follow me on Twitter for updates. My handle is at Egberto Willies, at EGBERTO WILLIES. That's it, folks. My name is Egberto Willies. This is Politics Done Right, and you know how I end this baby. I am what? Out. Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is a progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people.